Good morning. Welcome. Another lovely Saturday morning and a weekend. End of September already. Well, thank you for welcoming me again into your home and listening to the thoughts I have. It's been an amazing journey, hasn't it, for us through this really strange 6 months of our lives. And I don't know how much longer it's going to go on for, but I'm going to be here for you every day until we come out the other end of this very strange tunnel that we're in. But we are in our gospel. We're almost at the end of Luke's gospel. We've been going through it, and we're in Luke 23 and looking at 2 or 3 little verses that are often overlooked, I think. And we're looking at verse 48 and 49. We are very blessed to have 3 Gospels, 4 Gospels. One of my cats pushing the door open again. Oh dear, it's not a studio where I record. And each one of the Gospels records the crucifixion of Jesus, of course. And each one adds something to our knowledge of what happened. And we're very blessed by it. But the whole sweep of the event is in all the Gospels, but there are additional things that really help us. And there's a verse here which only Luke records. We've had the darkness, I talked about that yesterday, the darkness, and then the centurion who acknowledged that something really amazing had taken place. In Luke's Gospel, he says, certainly this man was innocent. And in one of the other Gospels, it says, surely this man was the Son of God. A centurion, it's quite interesting that his record is there because a centurion would have been involved in crucifying many people in the Roman era. It was part of his military responsibilities. And so he would have had other experiences of crucifixions to compare this one with, and this one stood out in many, many ways as a stark contrast to the others that he had been overseeing. So we have his remark in verse 47, and then verse 48 says, and all the multitudes who assembled to see the sight, when they saw what had taken place, returned home, beating their breasts. Now, Luke is the only one who mentions this. I mean, we do know from the record that there were people standing at the foot of the cross who mocked Jesus, who said those amazingly prophetic words, he saved others, let him save himself if he is the Christ. Or he can't save him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. Well, that was true. If he'd saved himself, he couldn't have saved us. And they were being prophetic. But we can surmise that the multitudes that were there were those people who had been calling for his death. And they followed the criminals and Jesus as they walked out of Jerusalem. And they observed all that had happened. And they experienced the 3 hours of darkness. They heard the words that Jesus spoke from the cross. They saw the way that he died very much sooner and in a very different way to the way that other people died when they were on a cross. And what they saw tormented them. They returned home beating their breasts. This is an expression that says that they were in torment. They didn't know what to do with themselves. They realized that this was the most awful thing that they had ever done in their lives. And it's interesting to think about the impact that the crucifixion had on the people around that watched, on the centurion and presumably on the other soldiers who cast lots for his clothing. And also it says in verse 49, all his acquaintances and the women who'd followed him from Galilee stood at a distance and saw these things. And that gives us the hint that it was probably from the women that Luke had got the information that he had as he recorded what happened. You can tell from his gospel that he got a lot of his material about the birth of Jesus from Mary directly, because he says several times, Mary kept all these things and pondered them. She remembered them. She went over them in her mind, and she recounted to Luke what had happened to her. And I imagine, in my mind's eye, I can see Luke going round the principal places in Galilee and speaking to the people who had journeyed with Jesus and who had come down to Jerusalem on that last week of Jesus' life. And I think that's all I want to say really today, is to focus on that, because today, it's strange we're thinking of it as Saturday, the day between when Jesus died and when he rose again was a Saturday, and Jesus was in the tomb, gone, and we can only imagine what the disciples went through and what the followers of Jesus went through. They'd been told by Jesus he would rise, but I don't think they grasped it at all. There's no evidence that they did. And Joseph, a good man, a member of the council, he'd been involved, but he hadn't agreed with anything that had been planned. It's quite clear from Luke's gospel that he was not involved, and he was a very courageous man. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. He didn't go to his own people because they didn't have the authority to hand the body of a criminal over to him, but he went to Pilate, and Pilate gave him leave to take the body of Jesus and bury it. And he buried it in a new tomb, in his own tomb, in which no one had yet ever been laid. And the women followed and saw where he'd been laid and made preparations to anoint his body in a day's time. So we have this day which I often think of as being a day when the whole of creation held its breath. The Lord of life was dead, and life was suspended for this period between when Jesus died and when he rose again. And it feels, when I read it, as if the whole of the world stopped and drew its breath in and waited and just paused, and until the resurrection morning, when all heaven broke loose. You know, we say all hell broke loose, but all heaven broke loose on the day of the resurrection. But we are in the pausing day, the day of waiting, of waiting, of waiting. And we've all had days of waiting, haven't we? But be sure that the morning will come. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.